Hi guys, Jane here, and today I want to talk to you about what I read in January of 2019. It was actually a really full reading month for me. I totaled 9 books read and 2 DNF'd. And my ratings were all over. I had some really low and really high. I didn't have any 1 stars, but I had a couple 2 stars, a 3 star, several 4 stars, and a couple 5 stars. A couple 5 stars. So it was a little bit all over the place. To avoid making this a terribly long wrap up, I am going to be doing individual book reviews for the books that I finished, and they will be appearing at different times. So keep a lookout for those. For today, I'm just going to give you a basic idea of what a book is about and what I rated it and a brief reason of why. So let's get started, and we're going to start with my DNFs, and then we're going to go lowest to highest. So the first DNF I had was the Yada Yada Prayer Group. Now, there wasn't anything inherently wrong with this book. It just wasn't for me. A friend had asked me to buddy read with them, and I started and they didn't end up starting, and I wasn't interested enough to continue without it being a buddy read. This is about a woman who goes to a women's conference with her church group, and she meets a lot of women, and as far as I can tell, is going to learn about people who are different than herself. You know, people who maybe had a different upbringing, are living in poverty, have had some sinful pasts. Not really sure. I got about 5 chapters in, and like I said, nothing inherently wrong, just wasn't for me, and outside of a buddy read, I'm not interested. The next book is Sometimes I Wake Up Grumpy and Sometimes I Let Him Sleep. And this book actually came from my grandmother's shelf. My grandmother had passed away last summer, and I ended up inheriting a lot of her books. And one of my goals is to read through several of her books. And I actually had thought this was going to be a relationship type book, and it's not. It's meant to be kind of a self-help for improving your mood and being a happier person. I got about halfway through and I didn't really like it. I definitely thought 12 Rules for Life by Peterson was better. As far as for my needs, maybe this was just not as advanced. Also, and this is a really weird complaint, I felt like this was a little bit too sexual in places. There are a ton of lists in this book, and one of them is like things to do if you feel like eating your feelings. Being a big girl, you can imagine I do sometimes occasionally eat my feelings. And there were like 3 things on the list that had to do with, you know, talking dirty to your husband, buying lingerie, and being intimate. And that just didn't work well for me. When I am stressed out, that is the last thing I want to do, is to try to be amorous with my partner. So it wasn't a bad book. It just definitely, absolutely was not for me. So I'm going to be passing it on to somebody who maybe will be able to appreciate it a little bit more. All right, so those were the 2 books I DNF'd. Now for the books that I finished, and again, we're going to start lowest to highest. So starting with my 2 out of 5s. The first one, and I was so disappointed about this, was The Dogs of Christmas. Now this looks like it should be a fairly simple romance. There's puppies, and there's a romance, and it's Christmassy, and it should be an easy 3 out of 5 and probably 4 out of 5, but it wasn't. So this guy named Josh, he ends up with a mama dog and 5 puppies, and he's never had a dog before, so he goes to the Humane Society and asks for help, and the lady there says, we'll help you, and then we'll rehome the puppies once they're grown, which will be about Christmas time. And of course, him and the girl at the Humane Society fall in love. Here's what I have to say about this book in general. There's a lot of things I didn't like, but I didn't like the main characters. Josh and Carrie, I couldn't connect with them. I didn't think either of them was a very likable character. About the only thing good about this book was the dogs. So it didn't work for me. Plot-wise, it was an interesting idea, but I felt like the author was like, well, what else can I do? And he kept throwing stuff and throwing stuff and throwing stuff in the book that I didn't feel was absolutely necessary. So it wasn't a terrible read, and I do seem to have a minority opinion on this because it has fairly high reviews on Goodreads. I just really did not like this book, and I didn't like the characters that fell in love in the book. So, not for me. The next book is My Brother, My King by C.L. Mozena. And this was a short story. And I think it was also a 2 out of 5 for me. The main plot of this is there's a character, Devin, whose brother is going to inherit the throne that he thought he was supposed to inherit. His father, who is not his brother's father, convinces him that he should kill his brother in order to inherit the throne. And at the last minute, Devin decides he can't kill his brother and ends up killing his father instead to prevent his brother from dying. And then the rest of the book feels guilty about killing his father and lying about it. And I gave this a 2 out of 5. It was an okay story, but it wasn't very well developed. And I know it's a short story and maybe that's part of it, but I really wanted a lot more in the world building and it just didn't happen. This one, by the way, if you're interested in more details, the review for it will be coming out on the 11th, February 11th, so keep an eye out for that. The next book on my list, and this one was a 3 out of 5. It wasn't terrible, it just wasn't what I was looking for. And that is A Weaver Christmas Gift. Okay, so the girl in this is named Jane, and she's been having a casual friends with benefits relationship with this guy named Casey. She decides to tell him that she wants to get married and have a baby, and of course, that's not what he wants, and so they kind of break up and spend the rest of the book figuring out why they shouldn't break up and they should be together. Not a bad book, nothing special. There were several things that didn't work for me, one of them being, and this is a small point, there's a dog on the cover and the dog really plays no role in the story. If you give me a dog on the cover, I want a dog in the story. The other thing that didn't work for me is Casey's job. It's not really mentioned in the blurb, and they tell you in chapter 2, so I don't feel like this is a huge spoiler, he is a spy of some kind, like he works for like a spying organization, and that's not something I enjoy. And had I known he was going to be a spy, I probably would not have picked up the book. So that's like one of the reasons him and Jane can't get together, is because she doesn't know what he does for a living and he can't tell her. And yeah, it wasn't bad. It just, yeah, it was okay. Not great, not terrible, just a 3. The next book I have, and this is one I actually enjoyed quite a bit. The Corgi Case Files Case of the One-Eyed Tiger. And I will be putting a pretty color picture up probably of that because I know it's hard to see on my Kindle. One of my goals this year was to read a book from my Kindle every month, and this is the Kindle pick I have. My paperback pick was My Brother, My King. So this one by J.M. Poole or Jeffery Poole, depending on how you look it up. It was a 4 out of 5 for me, I believe. Yes, a 4 out of 5. And the full review of this will be out on the 15th. I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed the character. Zach comes to town. He's a widower, and he has inherited a winery. And when he arrives in town, he kind of gets this corgi dog foisted on him, and shortly afterwards, he's accused of murder. At this point, he's just trying to prove his innocence, and his dog helps him. This wasn't an amazing mystery, but I really enjoyed the narration and the narrator voice, and I do plan to read more books in the series. I really overall enjoyed it. The next book was Inventing Scrooge, and this basically is the story of Dickens' biography and how it created Scrooge, things he probably saw or people he knew that influenced the characters. Overall, I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. It was a little slow and rough in certain places. There's a lot of quoting of older text, especially in the beginning, and I came really close to DNFing this early on because it just read very dryly. But then as we got into the book, it got much better, so overall I did enjoy it, but it was hard to get started. The next book I read, which was also a 4 out of 5, and the complete review will be out on the 18th, and that is Cinder. This is a Cinderella retelling in a futuristic world. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give it away, but Cinder is a cyborg, and she meets the prince, and they form a friendship, which has the potential to be more, but there's things that Cinder doesn't know about herself, and that we learn about Cinder, and I loved it. It was a great story. The ending shocked me. I wasn't really sure how I felt about it. I'm about to read the second book, so I'm hoping that that helps me deal with the ending. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this book, had a good time. Don't have many complaints. The sci-fi world was easy to understand. The only thing that didn't work, like I said, I was a little disappointed / sad / not feeling it at the end. But maybe the second book will solve that. And the second book, Scarlet, is one of my planned reads for February. All right, the next book on the list is also one that I'll have a review up soon. The review is coming up on the 9th. This is a reread for me, and it was a 4 out of 5, and that is Fablehaven. So in the Fablehaven series, you have Seth and Kendra, and their grandparents own or are caretakers of a magical sanctuary. Now, Seth and Cinder don't know this, and they go to be watched over because their parents have something they have to do. And they learn about Fablehaven, they learn about the sanctuary, and bad, crazy things happen, and they have to save the day. It's a fun read. It's a little bit slow in the start, but I've read the whole series of this. I love the series. I love the series that follows it. I believe it's called Dragon Watch series. Overall, just a great series that I highly recommend. Middle grade, a little bit scary if you've got real young ones. I know there was a scene in here that my 7-year-olds were close to not being okay with. So that was the only downside, really. And like I said, kind of the slow start. It was very difficult to get into the first time I read it, and then this time introducing it to my girls, they had a little bit of trouble in the beginning. But ultimately, they liked it. They want to read on. I loved it. I read the whole series. Highly recommend. All right, now we're getting into the 5 out of 5s for this month. And the first one is Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library. This is a really cute, fun read. It is a middle grade, and it has kind of a Willy Wonka type feel to it. So this town has been without a library for 12 years, and when they rebuild the library, it is sponsored by Mr. Lemoncello, who is a big-time game maker. He makes video games, he makes board games. If it is game-related, he's probably got his hand in it. And he does a contest for the students in Kyle's class to find out, or to get a chance to be the first to see the library. And it ends up being a game. They are locked in the library for 24 hours and must find their way out. If they find their way out, there is a lucrative prize waiting for them on the other side. I really had a great time with this book. I really enjoyed the puzzles. This is one that I felt was fun even though I'm an adult. Some of the reviewers didn't feel the same way and felt that this was a good kids book, but not so much for an adult readership. Personally, I disagree. I had a great time with it. One thing that I did think was really cool, and I show this in my review, but I'm going to show it to you too. There's clues like this. They're very visual, and at the back of the book is a bonus clue. If this book hadn't already been a 5 out of 5, this bonus clue would have made it a 5 out of 5 for me. So I really enjoyed this book. I plan to read the whole series. The next book is on my to-be-read shelf for February, and since March, I believe is middle grade March, I may finish up the series and read another book by this author at that point. I've got to wait and see, but I'm really excited to continue. Loved it. And the last book I read this month, which again was a 5 out of 5, and this is a little bit controversial because I feel like people had really mixed feelings about this book. I loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved it, but I've definitely heard some people didn't. And that is The Afterlife of Holly Chase. So this is a retelling of A Christmas Carol. and actually the reason I read the Scrooge book, the nonfiction Inventing Scrooge book, I read that right after this one. And this was a really fun read for me. Holly Chase is a teenager who dies and becomes the ghost of Christmas past. And they have a new ghost, or a new Scrooge this year who they have to save. And she finds herself very drawn to this Scrooge, and that they have a lot in common, and really desperate and interested in saving him. Really invested. This book made me cry. It was so many feels. I did have some trouble in the very beginning getting started, and there were some things that, it is a YA, so there's a little bit of whiny teenager in it, and you know, every now and then looking at it and going, you're 17, you're annoying. So if you really, really hate YA, this is probably not for you. But if you can get past the fact that the narrator is 17 and acts like she's 17, I thought it was a really fun read. I truly enjoyed this. It's a great Christmas book, and I would definitely read it again for a Christmas in the future. I do recommend it, again, if YA is fine with you. I know some people didn't like the romance, and I imagine some people didn't love the ending, but I thought those things were fine and great and made perfect sense for the story. So those were the books that I read in January. Overall, I'm pretty pleased, not only with the amount I read, which has me right on track. I want to read 100 books by the end of the year, so that's about 2 a week, and that's about right for January. And I also, as I said, did manage to read my paperback off my shelf and my Kindle book. So I met all my goals this month. I'm feeling great, feeling happy, and I will be putting out full reviews of all of the books there on that stack, except for the 2 that I DNF'd. Also, you can look at my Goodreads. If they are either up or they will be up, full reviews on my thoughts in the books, in case you want a little more, but you don't necessarily want to sit through a review video. All right, guys, this is Jane. My social media is below. Like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye.